possible. Obviously Polaris and Skidoo, and then also Summit Coffee Company. Interior Hardware, the Delta Dentist, and Western Power Sports, and then also Super TV. So we're super excited. These people have donated to the giveaway. They've donated money to make it possible. So I'm gonna start off with Teslin Hoyem. She's a member of our riders team, and she's gonna go over some maintenance for your machines.
So we're gonna go over basic riding maintenance. Skidoo, Summit, 154, best sled on the market. What I got here is, this is basically what I take riding with me. A small toolkit, and there's, usually you take your spark plugs, a spare belt, zip ties, tools for the cowling. You'll have spurs up here that you need to take off. I'll open this and just show you what we're dealing with. Slides off like that. So you're gonna need something to take these off in your toolkit. They usually come with a clutch tool, and on the other side of that clutch tool will be the correct. Always bring duct tape, just because everything can be fixed with duct tape. Right. Crescent wrenches and screwdrivers, pull cord rope, which is what we have here, and bring your straps and electrical tape. This is like the most important one. If you're riding a Skidoo, you really don't have to worry about it, but before you go riding, it's just kind of a good idea to go over the maintenance of your sled and see what needs to be replaced or worn, or if it's all in good working order. There's the basics. Check your lights, make sure your brakes work. That's a good one. When you're starting your sled, always set your brake. Because these throttles, especially in Alaska, tend to ice up. The last thing you want is to start your sled and you're like, heck yeah, I'm gonna go to the mountains, I'm gonna be badass, and your sled runs into somebody's truck. It's not fun. I've seen it, it's just not a good day.
Always plug your tether in. Because then if the sled does get away from you, even if you're on a mountain or whatever, then the sled's gonna shut off with your tether hooked to you.
Electrical components, sometimes they're all held together by zip ties, the harnesses and stuff. So if you break anything like, right here, you can easily just zip tie that back together so it doesn't get burnt by the exhaust. Something like that. I had this exact sled for 2 years. Well, I guess I had it for 2019. But I had it for 2 years and I never had any issues with the spark plugs.
The only ones that don't now for 850s is the new Expert sled, and that's going to come with a 4.7. And that's honestly what everyone should be using. All the guys on my team use that, and that's what I use too. And the biggest reason for that is, I won't knock the sled over just because we're a bunch of tools and stuff over, but when you are on your sled, no matter even if you're a little bit taller or not, you need to be in an active position. You need to be like rider stance, right? And then when you knock your sled over, you want to be in control. If you have a tall riser on and your sled's on edge, you're this much farther from your sled, right? You don't have any control of your sled. If you're up here, you're going to have control of your sled and be able to move it around. So I always recommend a shorter riser. First things I always do to every single sled I get before I go is I go with a shorter riser and I change out my brake and I put a smaller seat on. Smaller seat because these are a little high, and I'm 5'6", but you want to be able to maneuver your sled on either side. And I hit my feet on these a lot. This seat's just a little bit too tall. So if you get the lower seat that Skidoo has in the pack catalog, it's easy to jump from side to side. You're not catching your foot, and it's easier just to get to the other side of your sled. The other thing that people don't realize is you are constantly using your brake. If you want to get your sled on edge, you want to control your sled, you want to do pretty much anything, you need to be using your brake. If you ever see people do donuts and be able to hold that donut, knock their sled on edge, turn their sled, it's all with a brake throttle response. And for me, this stock brake is too far out for me. So you always want to ride with one finger out, and the stock brake for me, it's not comfortable because I'm stretched like this and I want to stretch my hand out. If you get a smaller brake, you can keep your finger like this and still have lots of control while you're riding. So I always do the smaller brake, shorter riser, and smaller
your clutch guard, or belt cover, whatever you want to call it. And this clip comes out of here. I guess I could put it back on. But it slides out of there. So it'll be in there and clipped, and you pull this in, and then you'll pull the cover off.
And the tool, when you have to change your belt, that comes in your tool kit. So when you have a sled, or you buy a snowmobile, they have tool kits, and that will have it in there.
That's that torque bit I was talking about earlier that will take all the panels off. It's on your clutch tool. So it separates it, and then your belt's pretty loose, you know? This is always everyone's like least favorite thing to do, no matter when you're doing it, but it's a nice thing to know. Always rotate clockwise. So you want to put it on the arrow pointed clockwise. The deal with your chain case is there is a tensioner in here. And I guess the rule of thumb with the tensioner, I can't really pull it apart and show you guys because it's a big mess. But the rule with the tensioner is that you want to keep it finger tight and then you back it off a quarter of a turn. And that'll ensure that your chain is loose enough and tight enough to go riding. So that's something you want to check. I mean, I wouldn't check it every ride, but just make sure that you're checking it throughout the season.
Just literally type it into YouTube, and there's like a video on how to do all this step by step. Because obviously we're telling you guys a lot of stuff today, and it's going to be really hard to remember it all. So honestly, just YouTube it, and Dave Nerona does like step by step for things like this.
So down here we have grease zerks, and they'll be like right there where that grease is. So they'll be on the skid plate and steering components, drive shaft, the rear suspension, and the front suspension. So you just always want to check those, make sure they have enough grease. You don't want to like over grease them, which is when the grease will come out from wherever the shaft or the bearing is, and it'll like splooge out. That's like over greasing it, and what you can do is create like ruin your seals and stuff like that, and then you'll have a whole nother problem. But just make sure those have grease, because without that, something will seize up, and then you have a potential problem on the trail or in the backcountry, and that's just something nobody wants to deal with. And I just kind of wanted to show you like the components that is what makes your sled, because then it gives you a rough understanding of like the actual mechanics of it. So you have obviously your engine here, and then your intake, and you have your belt and your clutch over here, exhaust here, and your can there, and then your coolant, you know, all that stuff we went over. And it is pretty complicated, and there's a lot of electronics to it, so I do recommend if you don't have like vast knowledge of it, probably take it to your dealer and ask questions first, and then later get comfortable enough where you're gonna actually work on it yourself. But there's a lot of things that can go wrong in the backcountry that you can take your hood off and just kind of figure out yourself. A lot of times it'll have like a error code that comes up on your screen, or it'll make like a pinging noise, and a lot of times that's this bolt right here. That's just your exhaust sensor that's either come loose or is completely out. I've had that happen a few times. And so that's something to just kind of know that you can take that off and check that before you bring it to your dealer, you know. And so that's one thing.
But for any of you guys that are, you know, just starting out riding, if your sled's not acting right, the best thing to do is take it to your dealer. This is stuff when you really start getting into taking the hood apart, stuff like that. You really want to know what you're doing.
Yeah. And
she's obviously telling you a lot of information too. So it's good to know this stuff, but you know, you normally would never have to do this on a scooter. So
you normally don't, but that's how you take the hood off. There's just these, I think it's 4 screws or 6 screws in the hood, and you'll be able to see them. Phillips over here on the air box, and you'll pull that off, and it'll all just slide off. And then you can just work on whatever you want there. So we have that. That's how you access your spark plugs, which are back here. Like she said, you probably won't ever have to do it, but it's good to know like how to pull that cover off just in case you have any issues.